Welcome back. So before we start actually adding this to Angular, I just want to talk a little bit about these DTOs, data transfer objects, that we're going to use, because we need to somehow map the JSON we're getting from the backend into these data transfer objects. So let's have a look what's going to happen. When we're done with this, a couple of lessons, we're going to end up having a request that we can send using an HTTP client from Angular. We can send a GET request, for instance, to the backend. Now what the backend is going to do is actually it's going to go through the different layers, all the way down here, call some SQL, get some rows back, convert them to C#, send them back all the way up here, and then it's actually going to end up having some kind of product right here, the REST API, with an ID and a name. And the REST API is then going to take that product and convert it into an HTTP response with some JSON inside that represents the product, okay? Notice one thing that changes is, for instance, the ID is going to be a number right here instead of an int that it actually was inside the web API right here. It's going to then send that response back over the wire right here, and it's going to hit Angular, and Angular is going to say, okay, let's convert that back into a DTO now that represents this in TypeScript instead of C#. So it's going to take this guy and convert him into this guy. And now we can represent these as TypeScript that we can then show inside our browser. So that's what's going to happen. So let's start with creating the DTO. We're going to focus on creating the DTO right now in the front end, and later I'll add the DTO in the back end as well. But for now, we'll just use the C# model project in the back end, and in the front end we're going to use the DTO that we're going to generate right away. So that was just to give you guys an overview about what's going to happen this lesson right here. Let's go first to the back end actually. When we call the HTTP GET request, notice you're going to return a list of products. So it's an array of products we're going to get back right here in the JSON response. That actually means that we should put on square brackets like this around it, because there's going to be multiple of these guys when we actually return this in our response. So let's jump back. Now let's have a look at how the product should actually look so we know what's going to be inside this list. And here's the product as it looks right now. We have ID and we have name. And again, I'll make a DTO for this later, but I want to do a test driven, so it's not this lesson right here. Now we know how it should look. It needs an ID and a name. Let's try and map it now in the front end, because again, we need to make a mapping in Angular so it knows that it needs this product DTO so it can read the data from JSON, right? So let's jump into the front-end code right here and see how we do that. The easiest way to just do an ng generate, I'll say interface. I want to generate an interface right here. It's going to be under products like this, under products. That's where I want my interface to be. And I'm actually going to put it under a shared folder right here, because this interface I'm going to build is going to be used across of multiple of these components that we're going to build. That's why I put it in the shared folder. And then let's just call it product.dto. Nothing more. So product.dto. Now let's try and execute this, and what you'll see is actually it's going to create this interface for me. It's also going to create the shared folder for me, and here's our product DTO now. And if I open the file, there'll be a small error right now because you cannot put in product.dto. The reason to put that in there is because I put in .dto in the name right here when I created it. But I can just remove that, and now I have a good name for my interface right here. The next thing I want to do is I want to add those properties. So I just copied them from C# right here just to show you. You do not have int inside TypeScript. Instead, what you'll do is just ID, and then you're going to use number. And that's all you have to do to create a property inside TypeScript compared to the C# code right here. We'll do the same for name. So I'll do a name right here, and that's going to be a string. And there we go. Now we have the name mapped as well. So that's all we had to do. Now we kind of mapped how a product should look inside Angular, inside the TypeScript code, compared to how it looked inside our C# code right here. So now we can actually start sending that data over the wire. Now it's going to be a list, but that doesn't matter. We'll just wrap this in an array for now, and later we'll look at something called filtered list. But for now, let's just make a simple array to send the data, so we can now send it over the wire inside an HTTP response and convert it into a list on the Angular side. That's what we'll do in the next lesson, where we start talking about services. See you next time. Now you know all about DTOs. Bye-bye.